Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about angle measurements in transversals, and this is going to be for a really special case. So the special case that we're going to look at is if we have two lines. So in our example that we have, if you're using the slides, we have line A and B. If these two lines that are going to be, we say, cut by a transversal, if these two lines are parallel, and you might see this symbol in that slide, that means they're parallel. So A is parallel to B. If these two lines, these two parallel lines, are cut by a transversal C, then some really special things happen. So we have angles, they're numbered just like this on your slides. If these two lines are parallel, meaning they have the same slope, they're going in the same direction, they're just one's a little bit lower than the other, then these four angles right up here, these four angles, if you were to pick them up and put them down on top of these four angles, they would be identical. They would be the exact same four angles. So if these two lines are parallel, then the transversal that cuts them, it creates the same four angles for both points of intersection at both lines. But if we look into the relationships now, that would mean that angle 1 and angle 3, they're the same angle, they're going to be congruent to each other. Angle 1 is, we use the symbol congruent to angle 3. But if we think of the relationship between them, the special pair that they are, these are corresponding angles. So all the corresponding angles are going to be congruent. 1's going to be congruent with 3. 2 is going to be congruent with 4. 5 would be congruent with its corresponding angle, which is angle 7. And then 6 would be congruent with angle 8. So all corresponding angles are congruent. And we can even go a little further with this too. If you look at angle 1, we just said it's congruent with 3, but angle 1 is also congruent with angle 6 because they're vertical angles. So angle 1 is congruent with angle 6 because they're vertical. Angle 1 is congruent with angle 3 because they're corresponding. So if 6 is congruent to 1 and 3 is congruent to 1, well then 3 is going to be congruent to 6. These two angles are going to be congruent to each other. And those two, if we think of their relationship, are alternate interior angles. So alternate interior angles would also be congruent. So angle 3 would be congruent to angle 6. And then likewise, these alternate interior angles, angle 2 and angle 7, they're going to be congruent as well. They're going to have the same measure. And we can even go a little bit further than that as well, and we can look at angle 3. We said angle 3 is congruent to angle 1, and if we use vertical angles here, angle 3 is also congruent to angle 8. So therefore, if 1 is congruent to 3, and 8 is congruent to 3, well then 1 is congruent to 8. And these two angles have the relationship that they're alternate exterior angles. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 8, and that's because they're alternate exterior angles. And likewise, the other pair of alternate exteriors, angle 5 and angle 4, they're going to be congruent as well. So in a transversal, if we have two parallel lines being cut by a transversal, then corresponding angles are going to be congruent, alternate interior angles will be congruent, and also alternate exterior angles will be congruent. And we can use these to find missed measurements. So let's go to a nice little example problem for us. We have A and B again, and we are given that they are parallel, so we need the lines to be parallel for this to work. And we have, here's our transversal C, and then we have angle 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And we're also given that the measure of angle 1 is equal to 110. And we want to find the measurement. We'll just try to find every angle here. So if angle 1 is equal to 110, well, by vertical angles, we also know the measure of angle 4 equals 110 because they're vertical. And from what we just said, since these two lines are parallel, the transversal is going to make the same 4 angles. So angle 1 will be congruent to angle 5. So that means angle 5 has the same measurement as angle 1. And then you can also think of it like vertical angles here. Angle 5 and angle 8 will be congruent. We just said alternate exteriors are congruent, so you can think of it like that. Or since you know angle 4, you can think of corresponding angles. 4 corresponds with 8. Either way that you think about it, angle 8 is going to have the same measure as all of these. So we have 1, 4, 5, and 8. Now can we find the measurements of angles 2, 3, 6, and 7? Well, to do that, we need to use supplementary angles. So I'll go to angle 1. Angle 1 and angle 2, they're supplementary together, meaning they add up to 180. So the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 should equal 180. They're supplementary. They make that whole straight angle. We know the measure of angle 1 is 110. And we're adding the measure of angle 2. So we just subtract 110, and the measure of angle 2 should equal 70. So measure of angle 2 equals 70. Now we can use that to find some other missing angle measurements. Angle 2 and angle 3 are vertical, so therefore they have the same measure, so angle 3 is also 70. Angle 2 corresponds with angle 6, so then the measure of angle 6 is going to be the same as angle 2, should be 70. And lastly, we can say 6 and 7 are vertical angles if we like, so the measure of angle 7 is 70 as well. So there's all of our angle measurements for all the angles in here. Let's do one more together, and then we'll try some where we have to make a few equations to find missing angles. So our next one, we have, things look a little different. We have line N and line P, and then we have M like this. We are given that N is parallel to P, and I'll write the angles in right now. The measure of angle 4 is 62, and we have 1, 2, 6, 5, 3, 4, 7, 8, like this. So N and P are parallel lines, and M in this case is the transversal that forms the angles here. And we're given that angle 4 is 62. So if angle 4 is 62, we should be able to find 3 other angles that are 62 because these 2 lines are parallel. So one of the other angles, well, right away I would notice the vertical angle. Angle 8 is also 62. If you go back to angle 4, you can use corresponding angles. So angle 4 corresponds with 1 here. So the measure of angle 1 should be 62. And if you want to stick with angle 4, you can use alternate interior angles. That would be angle 4 and angle 5. So angle 5 should be 62 as well. Angle 5 is also vertical with 1, and it corresponds with 8, so they all should have the same measure. And now if we know angle 4 was 62, let's say we want to find angle 7 here. Well, the measure of angle 4 plus the measure of angle 7, these are supplementary angles, they form the 180, should equal 180. The measure of angle 4 is 62. We don't know the measure of angle 7, and we're going to find it. So we're going to subtract 62, subtract 62, so the measure of angle 7 should be 118. So now we have the measure of angle 7 equals 118, and then from that we can find some other angles. So if angle 7 is 118, you can use vertical angles. The measure of angle 3 should be 118. We can use corresponding angles. 7 corresponds with 6, so the measure of angle 6 is 118. And then I would just use vertical angles there. Angle 6 and angle 2 are vertical with one another, so they have the same measure. So the measure of angle 2 would be 118 as well. And these are all your measurements for all the angles. Alright, the last one that we'll do today, very similar thinking, is going to be this one here. We have a transversal K, and that cuts line A and through line B, and we are given that A is parallel to B. We're told this is Y, we're told this is 4x, and we're told this has a measurement of 80 degrees. So since these two lines are parallel, we know a lot. We know certain angles are going to be congruent. So if we look at, let's say we're trying to find Y first. If you look at the relationship, Y has, well, we don't know any of these angles, so we can't use any of those relationships, but Y is the alternate exterior with 80. And since these two lines are parallel, alternate exterior angles will be congruent, so Y has a measurement of 80. This angle would be 80 degrees. Now over here, between these two angles, well, the relationship between them is together, they make the 180. So 80 plus 4x should equal 180. They're supplementary. And then we're just going to solve, get x by itself. So 4x equals 100. X equals, you divide by 4, 25. So y is 80. X is 25. If we had other expressions in here, we could find other expressions. We know that this angle is also going to be 80. We know this is 80, so this will also be 80. And then we know these two angles are congruent, and these two angles are congruent as well. Alright guys, you can practice a little bit with these. Have a nice day.